Coaching is about change. So most of the conversations that we have with our clients are about change, changing their fitness, changing their nutrition, changing their mindsets. So how can we have conversation about change that are actually effective? Because if we have the same conversation about the same topics over and over again, that's frustrating for our clients, that's frustrating for us, and it's frustrating because our clients aren't moving forward, they don't get the results. And motivational interviewing is, especially in the realm of health, fitness, and nutrition, a super powerful technique. And I will show you the 4 main processes that you will go through to help your clients change. And if you like this video and tips around coaching, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So let's jump right into it. The 4 processes in motivational interviewing. We have the opening. That's really the start of the conversation. You're greeting the client. From there, we are moving into focusing. What is the actual topic of the conversation? From there, we move into building and strengthening the motivation. And our goal is to bring out our clients' inner motivation. It's not us putting energy into them, it's releasing the motivation and the energy inside of them. And from there, we're moving into action. So what are the next steps? So let's get specific. Engaging, the opening of the conversation. You can think about it as the hype process. It's really greeting the client, getting into the conversation and understanding what is going on in their life right now. So think about it as meeting a friend, and the first few minutes where you settle down, you exchange a few words, and you get into the conversation. And a couple of important questions you can ask here is, hey, what is on your mind? The idea is it's not just a very open question. Instead, it's narrow enough that it focuses the client, but it's also open enough to give space for a lot of different thoughts. And a follow-up question here very often is, and what else? Because clients give us the first thought that's on their mind, but maybe it's not the most important or maybe the most challenging thought. So having this follow-up question of, hey, what else, can be super powerful, because if we have more insight, it gives us a better understanding. And we as coaches don't jump right into, hey, let's fix this. So we first gather a little bit more information. And this start of the conversation, there's a very important mind shift, mental shift here, because it is easy for us to jump into the conversation, have the idea of we are the experts, we're here to solve a problem, or that we have to gather a lot of information and ask all the questions. This is not what motivational interviewing is about, and it's not helpful. Because at this point, you're really just in the beginning of the conversation. And if you start to jump into problem solving, your client may be not even ready. They don't understand and feel yet why the change is important. So what is a better mindset if you go into a motivation interviewing technique? One is replace questions with reflections. And I have another video that I link here where I talk about reflections, what they are and what different types of reflections we have, and to complexify your reflections. Why is that so important? Because engagement works as a communication, as a back and forth. Think about your best friend. They're not hammering you with question after question after question. That sounds like an interrogation. It feels like an interrogation. It's more your friend says something and you respond to it. You reflect their thoughts or you give an additional meaning to that. And this is the type of conversations that we have. So yes, some questions are important, but it's not an interrogation where you hammer them with question after question after question. So think about it as a normal, real conversation. So how do you know that we have good engagement, or how do we know that we have good engagement with our clients? It's really, do we have a real conversation? Is it small talk with a stranger? Oh, the weather is nice. Yes, the weather is nice. How are you doing? Yeah, well, you gotta move on, you know? Or is it real? Is it something specific that the person is telling you? Are they engaged? Are your bodies synchronized? Is there eye contact? Is there a connection? Only if you have this engagement, this real connection between two people, you can move on. And if you're working as an online coach, let me know, and I'm happy to help you develop a strategy when you are a more text-based coach. So let me know. Once you have the engagement and there's connection, you can start to focus. So this is about what is the conversation actually about. The idea is finding a direction. Where is the conversation going? And ideally, you want to hone in and understand what is the particular goal of the client and how do we want to change, or what are the potential changes that we want to implement. And the important part here is, in health and fitness, it can be super obvious. So it doesn't have to be a long conversation. If the client says, hey, I want to improve my strict press, then that's very easy. And you can talk about what are the implementations. But if it's more vague, for example, I want to feel more confident, then it might take a while to understand, hey, what is actually the topic we have to talk about? What is the limiting factor in I'm not feeling confident? This is how a conversation with a friend is different, or how motivation interviewing is different from a conversation with a friend. It's the importance of the focus. If you're sitting with a friend in a cafe, you talk about everything. But in motivational interviewing, while you have the engagement and the real conversation, there's always a focus. You want to come to a goal, to something that you're going to work on. So this is very important to understand. It's not just a nice conversation, there is a direction. And something that is important to understand is that it's not just weight loss. Oh, that's pretty easy as a focus, but we want to hone in and understand what are the specific behaviors that we might want to change. So if weight loss is the goal, is it eating less? Is it is it making better food choices? Is it eating less sugary candy and sweets kind of type foods, whatever? So it's not just, oh, I want to lose weight. Okay, that's our focus. It's going down from a very global idea of what is it to more specifics. And in this process, you already get a feel of where is resistance and where are barriers. So for example, if we stay with the candy example, is maybe eating candy a difficulty for the client, but the husband likes candy and they want to keep it in the house. So you have already, okay, we want to work on eating sweets, but there are barriers that we cannot remove all the sweets at all the time. And from there, we have to slowly build to the specific point. So what is the specific behavior that we want to change? And just a few things to think about while you're in this conversation. This is very similar to the idea of a SMART goal, but this would be more a SMART behavior goal. So at least they have to be willing to change it. If they say it's a no-go, then you need to refocus. It has to be clear. It's not just don't eat sweets, It's more, okay, reduce sweets or remove sweets from the household. It has to be relevant because, oh, well, you could work on playing less video games, but is it actually helpful for your weight loss? The idea of one thing at a time. So you're not talking about, oh, I should reduce sweets, eat less, train 3 times a week, and improve my sleep. There are, each of them is a target behavior, but not all of them. And something that can come up sometimes is it something that they can actually control? So what their husband does is not always something that the client can control. So what is that they can control? What is their response to the husband eating candy or the children wanting sweets? It's just to understand, okay, how specific is my target behavior? But in this, we have to balance, and that is something that is fairly tricky, especially in the beginning, because we may have an idea what the client could do, but we don't know for sure. But if we don't reflect on this, that we have an agenda for them, but they have an agenda as well, and we focus too quickly because the client says, oh yeah, I could eat less fatty foods. And you say, yeah, that's a great idea, let's focus on that. But the client actually has a couple of more different ideas that might be more easier or more important for them. So this is something that super easily can happen, and that we as coaches have to be aware of, that we can focus too quickly because the client says something that we want to hear. So keep that in mind while you have these conversations and ask yourself, is it something that I want, or is it something that the client wants? And 99% of the time, go in the direction of what the client wants. Make a quick gut check. Have you focused too soon? Is it maybe too soon to go into a specific behavior? Maybe you have to explore a little bit more. This comes from experience, but also checking with the client. Are we going in the right direction? And then you essentially have 3 cases. You have a clear focus. The client says, I want to improve my strict press. Cool, let's work on eating more. And by that, we mean adding a tablespoon of oil to all meals, or adding a cup of carbs to all meals. This is where you have a clear focus, and you can directly move into evoking evoking motivation, that we will talk about in a second. The other case is you have a couple of different examples. If we stay with improving the strict press, you could work on eating until you are stuffed, eating more carbs, eating more fat, or maybe eating more fattier cuts of meat. You have a bunch of different options. And that's what we call, or what I call, a menu of options. You can discuss, hey, what is the most important, or what is the easiest option for the client? And if you're not clear what the focus is, you can ask a couple of questions to help build up the open space of potential focus and then move to a specific focus again. So this is something like, what do you want? A question that clients very rarely hear. What is important to you? Also, how removing ourselves, not jumping into the expert role, is how can I help you? What is it that you need from me? And if there's a lot going on and they are confused and frazzled and all over the place, a great question you can ask is, okay, what is the real challenge here for you? If you focus too quickly, it can be frustrating for the client, and it can be frustrating for you because it feels like you're turning your wheels all the time, you're not making progress because you try to focus too quickly. So what you always have to ask is it something that I want for the client, or is it something that the client wants? Go with what the client wants most of the time. And then this is again more a gut feeling and understanding and seeing the client in front of you. So do we have a common purpose? Have we worked together towards this focus? Or have you been the one that, oh, that's a great idea. Let's talk about this. Now we go to this place. So consider and get this feeling of, are we collaborating on this process? Have we come both to the conclusion that this is our focus? So incredible, powerful, and helpful to not have the same conversations over and over again. So once you have a clear focus, you can move into evoking. And think about this as the process of why are we doing this? So we have a clear focus. Now we understand why the client wants to do this. This is why the collaboration in the beginning is so important. They want to change this. And now you're essentially building awareness and release all the motivation that is inside of them. It's not us anymore that is trying to push them, to plead them, to give incentives. Hey, do this and then and then. This is about releasing their inner motivation to change. And it relieves us from putting all the energy into them. It's more, hey, uncovering why you want to change this. And something that's important here is that this process is in a way directed by us. But on what I mean by that is we focus on the parts of the client that wants to change. So we reflect and we listen to the parts of our clients that want to change, and we strengthen that part of the client. There will always be a part that doesn't want to change, but we're essentially not listening to that part. We're only listening to the part that wants to change. But how we do that is something that we'll explore in a minute. So the mental shift here, very important, is it's not us anymore. We don't motivate our clients. Instead, we find the motivation in them. We have to let go of assessments. It's so common. Oh, I want to change this. Then coaches start, oh yeah, let's track first what you're doing right now. You're removing all the momentum. They want to change, then they change now. That's okay. You don't need a baseline. And avoiding resistance. I talked about this in a previous video, what resistance is and how it comes up. If you're interested in, I've linked it in the card above. So how do we mental shift our position? So this is about evoking. This is about bringing out motivation out of our client. We find in our clients the reason why they want to change. And engagement and focus are needed for that. We need to have a good connection with our client, and we need a clear focus on what they want to change. Because if we jump into evoking motivation in the first few minutes of the conversation, there's no focus and there's no engagement. Your clients won't be open to have this deep conversation with you. And then you're talking about something and you're trying to find motivation that is actually not relevant for the client. So this is why motivation interviewing often takes a little bit longer, because you have the engagement and you have the focus before you can actually start to go into motivation and evoking motivation. Super important to understand. These two steps need to happen, and they need to happen well before you can actually have a good experience and have a productive conversation about motivation. So, what is resistance? Why are clients saying often that they don't want to do this, or they say, like, yeah, okay, I will do it, and they don't do it? Resistance, you can think about it as sustained talk. So, sustained talk is essentially the opposite of change talk, is, oh, yeah, actually, I like eating sweets, or drinking with my friends is actually something that's really important to me. So this is where they bring up reasons why they want to sustain, why they want to change, why they don't want to change. I'm sorry. And discord. Discord is the disconnection between the coach and the client. So let's go into this a little bit more. So sustain talk, an example is, I don't really like vegetables at all. This is about the target behavior. You maybe have focused too soon, or maybe you have been just too quickly. Your client is not open to talk about or change their vegetable intake. So this is sustained talk. Hey, I like the way I eat right now. So vegetables is not something that I'm willing to eat. And the other part, and that is much more powerful, and it's really stopping all the track and all the momentum towards change, is discord. So if you have a situation where a client expresses, hey, you don't understand me, you are not listening, I don't feel valued, listened to, understand, then you have to make a break and refocus, understand your client doesn't feel connected to you. And if they don't feel connected, they will never be open to an influence from you. So if you have these situations where a client says, I don't think you understand what I'm talking about, that should be a big red flag where you understand, oh, something is not working well right now. And you might have to go back to engagement and first have a good conversation. The other part of discord is the rightening reflex. And I talked about this in the beginning and throughout the conversation. It is the idea of us being the experts and us having the urge to correct something. Our clients talk about all the difficulties that they have, why this is difficult, why that is difficult, and they have troubles here. And you want to help, I get it. And you give suggestions what they could do, but us giving suggestions is not always helpful. And I talked about this in a previous video as well, and a way how you can reduce this urge and how you can work with your urge to jump in and fix essentially your client. And if you want to know about this, I've added the video in the card above. So very important to not create resistance. Don't jump into fixing. Don't start with giving advice. Don't give them a direction where to go. Instead, assume that your client already knows how to solve this problem. And your job essentially is to help them uncover that they know they have the solution. Because if you jump into the rightening reflex, your client has something to resist on. They have the opportunity, hey, you're not listening. Hey, you're not talking with me together about what I want to do. And Discord is almost 100% a guarantee that your client won't change. So take care and avoid these behaviors. It's super critical. The next part is, once you avoided the expert role, when you stopped talking, essentially, you can listen, and that is so critical. You can listen to all the reasons why your client wants to change. That is what motivation interviewing names or calls change talk. It's everything that talks about moving toward change. And there are different kinds of change talk. It's not super important to know the different categories, but there's desire. That's very often in the beginning of a coaching conversation, of a coaching journey, is I want to lose weight, I want to get stronger, I want to be fitter, I want to eat better. This is all about desire. Ability is also something that comes up, is where they talk about what they already could change. Reasons is sometimes already a little bit deeper, is if I lose weight, I feel more attractive, or if I lose weight, I can play with my grandchildren. And the last part is that's often when clients come because of a recommendation from a doctor, for example, is I need to lose weight to get off the medication, or I have to build the endurance to pass the test to get a job. And think about this as the early stages of change talk. This is, oh, I want to lose weight, and it would be nice to be a little bit more, to have a little bit more endurance, but it's very early. But there is a second step that's a little bit more concrete. And this is about commitment, for example, when they already talk with you about, oh, I want to reduce my calorie intake. I want to eat more smart carbs. Or maybe even a step further, and they come to you and say, I've downloaded this app and I'm now tracking all my food intake with this cool app. Or I've downloaded this cool exercise program and now I can train at home. So understand that there are different levels of change talk and that they correlate essentially with the different stages of change. The early change talk is about desire, about ability. It's not super committed yet, so they are more thinking about change. And this later part where we are now, this is already more about planning. What am I actually going to change, or the steps that I'm already implementing to change? And from recognizing change talk, we go to responding to change talk. But here's an important part. Change is never easy and it's never clear and ordered. Very often, change talk comes with sustain talk, often in the same sentence, because that is what ambivalence is about. I want one thing and I want another thing. I want to sleep enough to recover from my training, but I also love to watch Netflix videos with my wife in the evening. I want to sleep more and I want to stay the same. Here are a couple of examples. I really want to lose weight, but I don't know that I have the time. I'm always tired and it's really hard. I want to lose weight, there's the desire, but also I am not sure that I can actually do it. So a potential response is making time is a challenge for you. At the same time, losing weight is important to you. So you have what I called in the previous video that I've linked above, a double-sided reflection. Making time is a challenge for you. That's their sustain talk. Losing weight is really important to you too. That's the change talk. Here's another example. All my friends drink, some of them probably drink way too much, but if I quit, I don't have any friends anymore. This is all about socializing now with in the summer or during the holidays in the winter. You always have these situations where people come together, they drink, they eat, and clients struggle to deal with the social pressure. So one way to respond is quitting would cause new problems for you. and you understand you're drinking too much. There are a couple of different ways to respond to change talk. The important part is that you are not jumping in and giving advice what to do. Instead, you're essentially reflecting back to them what they are saying, so they have to respond to it again. And think about this as building up commitment. They say, oh, I think I'm drinking too much. And you're reflecting back, oh, you're worrying that you might be drinking too much. And they again respond to it. And now they have committed already twice to change. This is where motivational interviewing is directed in a way. It focuses the client all the time on their desire to change. This is why we focus on what they want to change when we reflect. It's not that we reflect the sustained talk, because then they're more likely to stay where they are. We reflect their change talk, so they are more likely to change. And there are a couple of different ways to respond to change talk. One is elaborating. So asking open-ended questions about how would that look like? What are examples? Can you be a little bit more specific? Affirmations are a great way to say, oh, that's great. That's a great way to think about it. Or I like your self-awareness here that you're noticing, oh, you're maybe drinking way too much. Reflections, that's something that we already talked about a little bit and that I also have linked in the cards, is you add meaning to the conversation. In the previous example, oh, drinking less would create new problems because they don't have their friends anymore and they stay at home. And summaries are essentially a way to collect different change talk statements and put them together. Summaries are very much what summaries are about, but again, the focus is on the change talk. So you pick a couple of their change talk statements and you put them together in one statement. So these are the different ways to respond. And if you are interested in how to do this in online coaching or in text-based coaching, let me know and I will happily show you how to do it in a text-based environment. One of the great ways to ask to elaborate on the situation is the 4 crazy questions. So this is about the status quo. There are essentially 4 crazy questions. What is bad about changing and what is good about not changing? You're essentially giving your clients ambivalence a voice, and they can tell you all the reasons why it is good to stay the same and why is it good to not change. And you also ask them what is good about changing and what would be bad about not changing. And suddenly you have a bunch of different change talk statements that very often lead the client normally to change talk because they gave the ambivalence a voice. They essentially release this pressure of, there's a tension inside of me that wants to stay the same and move forward. And then they feel more open to move forward. Or you can pick all the change talk statements that they gave you in these 4 questions and reflect them back to them so they increase the commitment. Once you have change talk, very often the next step is to talk about confidence and saying something like, I want to improve my strict press and that's something I'm willing to do. And I would like to add a cup of cooked rice to every meal is change talk, but we are not sure yet how confident are they actually that they can do it? Because saying I can add a bowl of rice every day to my meals is easy to say. But if they don't have access to rice, for example, or don't know how to cook rice, that becomes difficult because they won't feel confident or even skilled to actually implement this. So a great start is to use the confidence ruler. For example, on a scale from 1 to 10, how ready do you feel that you can eat a bowl of rice every day? And then they give you a number, and let's say it's a 5. With a 5, you can explore different avenues now. You can say, oh, why did you not choose a 4? And at first, this is a counterintuitive question, but think about it. Now they have to give you all the reasons why they can do it. And that can be super powerful because they suddenly realize, oh, I have these strengths, these resources, these skills, and all of this is actually available to me. And another follow-up question can be, okay, what do you need to reach a 5.5 or a 6? And then they can be very specific. Oh, I need to learn how to cook rice. And then that's the moment where you can say, oh, would you like to give me an example of how to cook rice or a video? This is where you often can be the expert because they are lacking skills or knowledge. Another part of this evoking confidence or increasing the confidence is focusing on their strengths and resources. So we already had this in the question before. What strengths do they have? What skills do they have? What resources? What connections? What networks do they have that could help them? And once you have all of this, you have this amazing pool of resources and strengths, you can go into the conversation and say, okay, how would you go about it? How could you succeed? And they're telling you, yeah, there's my time management skills. I'm super organized. So I could use that to make an appointment with myself to train every day, every other day, for example. And if you give me an exercise routine that allows me to train within 30 minutes, I have everything I need to move forward and I feel 90% confident that I can do it. And another way to evoke confidence and increase confidence is by asking about past successes. So, what have they done in the past to overcome a challenge like this? For example, they may have lost a lot of weight in the past, and you can build on their experience and on their skills. And now the only thing that you have to figure out is how to move them into maintenance. So they know already how to lose weight. And now the actual change is how to stay there instead of gaining all the weight back. So this is a crucial part. You have change talk, but don't assume change talk means they will do it or that they are able to do it. Use the ruler to make sure your client is at least 9 out of 10 or 90% confident that they can do it. If they're not, try to build resources, build skills, or shrink the change. And I talked in a previous video how to shrink the change, and I've linked it above in the cards. So things to consider before you move into planning is, do I understand the reasons why the person in front of me wants to change? Am I moving too quickly? Yeah. Oh, I have heard one change log statement. Okay, let's move into planning. Super common, but one change log statement often is not enough for a client to actually change. So this is where the confidence conversation from the previous slide is so important. And again, always go back and check, Is this something that I want, or is it something that the client wants? And you always go with what the client wants to do. Planning is essentially the house step. So you have engaged, you have focused on target behavior, you have found the reasons why your client wants to change this part. Now you're moving into planning. So what are they going to do next? But here's an important part. Change is much broader than behavior. That means planning doesn't always have to be part of the motivational interviewing process. That's important to understand. Focus, engagement, focus, and evoking motivation, that is necessary for motivation interviewing. Planning is not, because implementing specific behaviors is often too much at that point. If you have very resistant clients that have lots of resistances, lots of ambivalences, if you try to push them to do something different, then they lose track. They fall off the wagon and they maybe never come back to you. So understand, it is motivational interviewing when they committed more to change, but they don't always have to change yet. They don't have to implement specific steps. So if you go out of the motivation interviewing conversation with your client and you haven't come up with a specific next action, it doesn't mean you have failed as a coach. It means your client isn't committed enough yet. And the beautiful thing is, you as the coach can help them in this part, in this process. This is under your control. You can help uncover their own reasons for change and reflect them back so they become more and more committed to change over time. If we think about it, change can be so much more. A decision is change. Forgiveness, leaving, staying, or compassion. They are all choices. There's no specific visual or visible, trackable behavior, but forgiving maybe yourself or someone else, or leaving something behind that has always been part of them, like always tracking their macro intake with an app, leaving it behind, is a choice. An attitude is also something that changes, but is not a specific behavior. So to be more compassionate to yourself is not a visible behavior change, but it can make so much with your client if they start to be more compassionate with themselves. It's also often how we approach something. So the mindset is a change that is not necessarily a visible behavior. And last but not least, the resolution. Yeah, it's making peace with yourself or with the client. Our client makes peace with themselves because of things they have done in the past that led to where they are now, or to take responsibility for what happened. Another resolution or acceptance is okay, I'm going to feel uncomfortable during this process. I will feel hungry at times. And at times I want to eat ice cream, but I won't. These are all changes that happen inside of your client that you cannot track, that you cannot see, but they happen. This is where the evoking of motivation is so important, because you can work on all these changes and your client doesn't yet have to do something differently. When is it time to plan? When can we move from evoking to planning? First step, you need to have good engagement, clear eye contact, or good exchange that is relevant and unique to the person. It's not small talk. You have a clear, shared change goal. You and the client have come to a conclusion that this is something they want to work on. And the last part is you have enough client motivation. And the emphasis is on enough. Client motivation can always be there, but it's not always yet enough to make a specific change. So keep that in mind. Engagement, focus, and enough motivation have to come together, all three of them, to plan. What can we do? How can we think about planning? The first important part is planning is never done. There will always be a next step. There will always be something to work on, to implement, to change. But this is not, okay, you're doing this and then it's done. It will always be something that you're working on with your clients and with a specific client. The other part, also in planning, don't assume that your client doesn't know the answer. Don't assume that you have to be the expert that provides all the answers. Instead, think about planning as a process that continues. Even if you have made a decision, this is the next action step, you always will go back to review and see, did it work? How can we adjust? Always assume that the client has the answer, because this pulls you out of the expert position, and that releases the probability that you have discord and sustain talk with your client. Sometimes they may not have the solution, and then you can provide ideas. But always assume first that your client already knows what to do. And then you again have three different cases. You have the clear plan. I want to improve my strict press. For that, I want to increase my nutrient intake in the form of eating a bowl of rice every day. So what I'm going to do is I eat a bowl of rice every day, and I make a check at the end of the day, did I do it or didn't I do it? The other option is, increasing my smart carb intake. Now I have different options. Do I increase it through maybe an inter-workout shake or post-workout shake? Maybe I drink a little bit more of my favorite beverages. I eat a small bowl of rice with every meal, or I eat one large bowl in the evening. You have different options, and you can discuss with your client what is the easiest solution here for you. And if the plan is not clear, then you have to go back, explore, maybe refocus, prioritize, and go from the general direction to more specific. If you want to learn more what to do when the plan is not clear, let me know, and I'm happy to help you and explain how to work through an unclear plan. So, coaching tips when you're at this stage. Summaries are especially great tool at this stage. You have engaged, focused, evoked motivation, and then you pull together all the different change talk statements. You essentially present them in this beautiful bucket summary to your client and say, okay, you have all these reasons to change. What are you going to do next? So summaries are a great way to transition from evoking motivation to planning. The next part is the options on the menu. Try as much as possible that the client brings the idea. And they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be good or bad ideas. They can just brainstorm. And you focus on listening, emphasizing, highlighting the change talk, highlighting their personal responsibility, their freedom. Because if you can create a menu of options that the client suggests, then there won't be any resistance anymore. Because all you have to do is highlight what they have been talking about. Think about it. You end the conversation with a plan to move forward, and everything on this plan comes from the client. Now it's their responsibility, it's their freedom. You don't have the, oh my God, are they going to do it or not? They said they want to do it. And if they don't, ooh, that doesn't feel really good. If you promise something that you suggested and that then you didn't do it, this is so powerful. When you come to this place where your client suggests all the changes, coaching will become so easy, I promise you. Try to make it clear for you and your client what is the action plan. Consider it writing it down or making a note. Secure in a few notes what their commitment is, and potentially share it with someone. So something that I like to do is making 1 or 2 sentences is, I'm going to do, so for example, I'm going to eat 1 small bowl of rice with every meal for the next 30 days, for example. Because this and that and that, and all their change talk examples. Because I want to press my wife during our wedding up into the air and make a crazy picture, for example. So make it clear both for you and the client. What is the next step? How do we know what is success and why is it important? Because then you can go back. You can say, I didn't do it. And then you can show them you committed to that. So what has been difficult? What has changed? So you can rework the planning process and improve it. And the final step here is, if you want to give advice, ask your client first. I have a couple of ideas, you have a couple of ideas, let's bring them together and see what's worked best for you. Or something that I like to say is, I have an idea, and you're totally allowed to say, that's crazy, Robin. I would never do something like this. But hear me out and maybe we come up with something new. And then I give my idea what they could do, and I ask them, how do they think about it? Do they have their own ideas of what they can do? So you can give your expert advice, but make sure your client has the permission, gave you permission, or has the permission to say, no, that's not for me. Because then again, it's on them. They have the responsibility to make the change because they said it, they committed to it, because everything now is theirs. Now I have to make the change. It's not coach that says I should change. All is on me. That's all mine. And if you think about it, if a client moves out of the conversation thinking it was all about me and we highlighted everything that I want to do and I know specifically why I want to do it, that's so powerful. So, what are some good questions to ask here in this process? What could you do next? So, how would you solve this problem? How could your solution look like? These are all steps and questions you can ask during the planning process. And again, in the previous video, I talked about this step a little bit more with more questions. So if you're interested in learning more about this, let me know. Understand, while it looks like this process is linear. It is not most of the time. So you will focus on something, you will evoke motivation, and then it might be that you notice, hey, there's something else that the client wants to talk about. So you go back to motivation. Or you notice in the process, hey, there's discord. There is something your client mentions, you don't understand me, you don't listen to me. So you go back to engagement and work your way through. So understand that while there is a logical progression from engagement to focus to evoking motivation to planning, it's not always in a conversation linear. You might jump very quickly into evoking motivation and then you move back a little bit because you notice, hey, there's something else we need to focus on. And then you go back into evoking and planning. So if a conversation is a little bit more dynamic and it's not this, then that, then that, then this, that's perfectly normal. And with time, you will notice that these loops will be fewer and fewer because you learn to better understand when is the right time to focus, when is the right time to talk about evoking motivation, and when can we start to plan. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested, I've linked two videos here. One talks about a lot of the things that we talked about here, but much more in depth. And the other is about improving your coaching skills overall.